Welcome to Preparing for Alien Contact Meetup. We've got 35 people here on the Zoom. This is February the 13th, 2022. And our guest is Mary Rodwell. She's on again. She's the founder and principal of the Australian Close Encounter Resource Network. And ACERN's primary role is to offer professional counseling, support, hypnotherapy, and information to individuals and their families with anomalous paranormal experiences, particularly specializing in abduction contact experiences. Mary's been at this since the 1990s, and she's recognized internationally as one of Australia's leading researchers in the UFO and contact phenomenon. She's author of Awakening, How Extraterrestrial Contact Can Transform Your Life, and The New Human, Awakening to Our Cosmic Heritage. And it's this, I've been reading this book now. It's really absorbing my attention. About 3,000 cases Mary's worked on suggest there is a global phenomenon of the star children who exhibit a maturity and wisdom beyond their years, an awareness and connection to spiritual realms. They have telepathic abilities, are spiritually awakened, describing many species of non-human visitors with the feeling that they are as real to them as their real family because they feel supported by them. So Mary's talk today is called What Hypnosis Reveals in Understanding Extraterrestrial Encounters. So welcome back, Mary. I did my first video with you in 2018, and it's always inspiring to have you back. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Brian. What is very important in this presentation, and I hope everyone can understand a little bit more about what's so important about hypnosis. It's been given quite a bad rap over the years in the more nuts and bolts side of this phenomena. And I have been really disappointed that that's been the case, because it's been such a useful tool in helping people recover lost memory, or whether or not they've had missing time episodes, or they want to understand more about their experiences. So I'm hoping to clear some of the misconceptions and how useful hypnosis is. And you're going to see several cases and how it has helped these individuals gain greater understanding about their experiences. And I'm also, as I say, going to explain why I believe it is integral and has absolute credibility when it comes to information. And I'll explain that as I go along. So here we have it. And I'm saying from fear to understanding, because for many people, it's the fear that brings them the worst, the most trauma, because they may be fearful of why it's happening, fearful of why them, fearful of what it means, fearful of not knowing their part in it. So fear can come not necessarily from what happened, but from the lack of understanding of what happened. And its reliability is really important here, because one of the things that has been thrown out carte blanche, usually by people who don't understand hypnosis, that people can confabulate, use their imagination, etc., etc. And this is what Dr. John Mack, who was a professor of psychiatry at Harvard University, who did many, many cases in his books, Abduction and Passport to the Cosmos. And this is what he said about hypnosis. The validity of information obtained under hypnosis has been a source of controversy in both the psychiatric and UFO communities. Nevertheless, it is my impression that data obtained through hypnosis in abduction cases is often more reliable because it comes without the conscious mind's distorting efforts to provide reasonable, coherent narratives. Basically, the conscious mind edits out anything it's not comfortable with, whereas the subconscious is relaying exactly whatever happened without editing. And that is why it's so difficult for a lot of people, because when things come out that astound them, they are quite confused by it and will say, are you sure that's not my imagination because it's so weird or so strange? And what I often say to them is, well, if it's your imagination, could you have imagined saying something like that? And their answer to that is, no, not in a million years. So that tells you something about creating a scenario. So this is what he's saying. No theory explains all of the following three elements: the consistency of subjective reports, the level of effect associated with these reports, both in and out of hypnosis, and the physical evidence corroborates the subjective reports. And this is really very important because a lot of my work and research is looking for corroboration of the information that is revealed through hypnosis. So what are the uses of hypnosis, particularly in the field of ufology? The recall of missing time events associated with encounters, understanding and clearing the origins of fear or phobias connected to encounters, connecting to the subconscious, superconscious for information, deeper understanding not available to the conscious mind, and access to the inner healer, which can remove blocks, old programs not serving the individual. So when you work in an altered state with someone, you're accessing a higher awareness. The emotional impact is real. There is no evidence a therapist can induce the level of emotion associated with these experiences, whether in hypnosis or by direct suggestion. Abduction experiences tend to have a high impact on the person involved. And again, I'm quoting Dr. John Mack and his impeccable credentials, who worked with so many experiences. So the first account that I'm going to show you is actually on Netflix for those who want to see the whole story. It's called Australian Skies 2, and the alien on the end of Australian is a play on words. It's correct. The physical and emotional impact from his experiences and his childhood illness, and Liam Freeney. Now, Liam came up and had a hypnosis with me, but I want to tell a little bit of his story because, again, it was enabling him to understand all these other anomalies in his life. Until the UFO sightings, he had no interest in UFOs. His childhood from 7 to 10 was really what was not completely frightening to him, because he didn't know what had happened, why he was having this continual illness, recurring migraines every Sunday, so severe the parents never took him away from home. So it was like clockwork for 3 years. Recall at night, convinced that someone, maybe 3 of them, were outside his window. So let's hear a little bit of his story. Dreams of flying and UFOs, or walking across a paddock, finding a UFO, then the door opening and 2 humanoid people saying, "We've been waiting for you." What on earth is going on? Marks and bruises on the body, a snake bite or something else?
See, this is where the UFO field, gets a wee bit different, or not different, complicated. I started having dreams of flying in UFOs, or like walking across a paddock and finding a UFO, and all of a sudden the door would kick open and there'd be 2 sort of humanoid-looking people going, "Come on, we've been waiting for you, let's go." And it's just, you wake up in the morning just going, what on earth? Next morning, this is what I woke up to. I do have that video. Oh God, yeah. I felt like I had been beaten up with a softball bat, like you wouldn't believe. So I'm taking photos in the morning and the evening. Serious bruising.
Jesus, you didn't go to the hospital for that?
Yep, I went to the doctor
And?
he sent me straight to the hospital. He goes, "You've been bitten by a snake." I'm like, well, I live in a nice 2-story house. I don't believe it got into the bed with me. So I was at Westmead Hospital, did toxicology reports, nothing. Now, I'm starting to get pretty confused by it, because this is really starting to mess with my head. As excited as I was to start with, I was like, well, what's going on?
And this is often the reason why I'm asked to do hypnosis. And what was, many people people experiences the marks and bruises on the body. And the other part that he was saying there, dreams. Well, when someone says they've still remembered a dream 10 or 15 years after the dream occurred, then it's possible and more likely that something very real has gone on. So he's seeking answers.
Morning, and you have the bruises?
I wake up in the morning and they're there.
I wish that we could, while we've got you here, while we're together and filming this, I mean, it'd be awesome if we could set up cameras to try and capture this. But the problem is, we don't know when it's going to happen. And that's the really frustrating thing for me, is all this stuff sort of happens and I can't catch it.
Frustrating doesn't begin to explain how I feel about this. I'd love to know where it's coming from, but I don't know what to do. I'm at my wit's end. I'm dealing with it. I'm carrying on with my normal life, but I'm trying to just forget about it all, but I'm still waking up with it. It's still happening.
Well, let me ask this, and don't be offended. Have you ever considered going to see someone like a professional?
I have looked into it, and there's pretty much only one person that I would look at going to see.
Who's that?
Her name's Mary Rodwell, and she's a contactee therapist. And if I was to go to anyone, I would probably go and see her, but she's miles away from where I live, you know.
Okay, well, let me ask you this then. If we could find out about Mary and if we could organise it, would you be interested in going down that path?
I think that where I'm at the stage I'm at, I don't have any other options, and I would like to find out more. So if you could organise it and we could get in front of Mary Rodwell, I would be there. I would go.
So Liam came to see me.
You know, they may say, is, well, you're probably going to think I'm crazy. You know, I saw this UFO and I felt different afterwards, and I'm not quite sure if something happened with time or whatever. You know, the first thing I say to them is, look at the questionnaire that I'm going to send you. And that is the very first thing I do, because they may not have been aware that this may have well been happening all their life. And seeing the UFO is the final part of their waking up. There's a lot of misconceptions about regression. We've all got a knowing inside us, you know, resonance to truth. Even if we can't prove it, we have that kind of resonance when we hear stuff. It may be, you know, random. You know, you hear something and you think, well, that fits for me. That makes sense, even though it can't necessarily be proved. What I do when someone's in that space, one of two things they want to know is, was it real? Did I have this experience? Secondly, why? Why me? What's it all about? Well, when you take them into that space, one of the things some researchers won't do is ask those questions. They'll get them to show the scenario. Yes, you're on a craft, you're lying on a bed, they're doing things to you, but they won't take it to that next level, which is actually asking questions. Because what I've discovered is when they're in that space, you can ask those questions and they can have a dialogue.
So let's take it to the next level.
You just see this bright light.
Okay.
Just see this super bright ball of light.
It's a ball of light.
Yeah.
Whereabouts is that ball of light?
At my head, right at my head height.
At your head height. Okay. What's the next thing you're aware of after you see this ball of light? What's the next thing that you feel or sense?
There's other things there.
What are the other things that you're sensing?
It's beams, three beams.
Can you describe what they look like?
They got big heads.
Okay. Have they got any clothing?
No, they just all grey.
Okay. Can you sense their height?
Same height as me.
Okay. What's your feeling from them?
I'm terrified. And they're leading me in. They're taking me out.
How do they take you out of your room?
Just through the glass.
What's the next thing you're aware of?
So it's a big room. It's bright.
So you're in a big room.
It's really bright.
Okay. So it's very bright.
It's hot as well. It's really hot.
Okay. What can you see? What are you aware of in the room?
I can't see anything. It's just this big, it's just bright, it's hot. I'm lying down.
What are you lying on?
A bench, table. It's quite comfortable, but it's thin.
Okay. And you're lying down?
I'm lying down. The tall sort of tall human person comes in. Looks human.
Okay. Can you describe what the colour of the hair is?
It's long blonde hair.
Long blonde hair. Is it male or female?
Male.
Okay. What clothing have they on?
It's like a green suit.
A green suit?
Mm.
Have you seen anything like that before?
Not in green.
Not in green?
No.
Okay. What are you feeling and what are you sensing?
I'm just scared. He's just holding my head. He's just got both his hands on my head. I just see lots of colours. Seeing lots of different colours.
Is that while his hands are on your head?
Yeah. Hearing information of some sort.
Okay, do you understand that?
No.
So what's the next thing then that you remember?
I'm just waking up sick.
Okay, and so you wake up feeling sick?
And I'm back in my bed.
Okay. I want you to sense and feel now this location that you were taken to. Where did you sense that location was? Or where do you feel that location was?
I was in a ship.
And these beings that interacted with you, do you get any sense of who they are?
Friends.
You felt they were friends?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. We can ask some more questions about that in a minute.
What I'd like to say about that was what was really important, just to remind you, was what was important to Liam was a particular time in his life from 7 to 10, where every Sunday morning he was ill with migraines. And so what we were able to discover was the reason for that was for 3 years, he'd been taken up on craft on a Saturday night to have these downloads, which ended up giving him the migraines the next day. So let's hear how Liam explains how he feels about that.
Did it help is the question I really want to know.
I think, I won't say a great weight's been lifted off my shoulders, but half of the weight has. I feel as though Mary answered or helped me answer some pretty serious questions that I gave to her, because I've given up. I tried to get rid of it. I tried to stop thinking about it, but you can't give up on waking up with marks.
Exactly. You've got to get some answers.
So that's what we did up here. And clearly there's more to be. I think it's going to be ongoing, but I really couldn't be happier right now with the way today went.
There's a lot more to the story, and if you want to see it, it's on Netflix, on Australian Skies too. So the next account that I will give you an overview of was a gentleman that lived locally that had been having experiences again from New Zealand. Both of these were gentlemen from New Zealand. And Greg awoke to his extraterrestrial encounters through a sighting when he was in the Navy. And this is the story. Greg has many of the distinct patterns from his extraterrestrial contact. When in the Navy, he had a UFO sighting. The sighting awakened recall in flashbacks and dreams of another significant experience. And that was a huge sighting, an encounter as a child in New Zealand. Greg was puzzled. He'd forgotten such a significant event. Through hypnosis, Greg discovered the full extent of what happened when he was 7 years old. And it was an event the whole town witnessed, which was a huge spacecraft appearing one evening on sunset. Hypnosis answered many of his questions as to how he became highly intelligent following this event, with upgraded mental abilities, understanding of complex cosmological data, fascination and focus on healing techniques, which he used in his healing practice, and why he chose to live in Queensland, Australia. Sadly, Greg passed away after a long illness a few years ago. Here is Greg explaining his sightings, which was from a Navy ship. They saw a silvery object 500 meters astern. They reported it to the officer of watch, who saw it as well. Radar also showed the anomaly. It lasted a few minutes. And a few days later, after this, he had dream recall of an event when he was 7 years old. So here's Greg speaking about his experience.
So my name's Greg, and this is my story of an experience that happened to me. It began in 1978. All right, mate. This story started in 1978. I was on a ship called Canterbury. It's a New Zealand naval vessel. I was working on my first duty as a port lookout sentry. It's a night sentry, which you look out and identify anything across the water, any lights, that sort of thing. And having been given the instructions, I'm watching the sunset coming down, because it was right on sunset. And I've been doing this job for about 20 minutes and sort of look through these high-power binoculars and have fun. About 17 and a half at the time. Now, after about 20 minutes anyway, I'm getting bored. So started looking down at the flight deck, seeing if anybody's coming up after scram, for dinner time. And I would come up on the flight deck and have a cup of tea and smoke in the yarn. Anyway, I'm looking down there, and there wasn't anyone there. And as I was bringing my binoculars up, just astern of us, I saw a silvery object that was illuminated by the sunset hitting it. This thing would have been approximately 500 meters astern of us and about 50 feet high. So relative to our guardrails, it was about 30 feet above our guardrails. Anyway,
sorry, Greg, how big was it in terms of?
It looked like it was about 50 meters across. It was a disc shape, so about 50 meters across from the distance I was. And so, anyway, as I saw this thing, it's glistening in the sunlight, and it's sort of golden and silver, but it's mostly golden because of the sunlight that way. And so I watched it for a few seconds. Then I got onto the bridge intercom and asked the officer watch to come down onto the Fort Bridgeway. So the officer watch came down. And he started to bother me because I'm not meant to be there. It's a different protocol, but addressing the bridge. Anyway, you don't normally summon it down. Anyway, so he came down, starts ripping it up. I just pointed at Stan and said, "Look at that." And that's when he went, "Oh, good God, how long's that been down?" I said, "About 3 minutes, I think." And so then he got on the bridge to the ops room and asked the ops room if they had anything astern of us, that they'd been tracking. Confirmed that they had something on radar, which they're waiting for a visual. All of this is happening in minutes, just a few minutes. At that time, the sub-lieutenant then talked to the Navy yeoman and says, "We have a close-set cameras for the flight deck, so to turn the camera on to see if they could track this thing." Just at about that time was when it started to move off and shot out through the starboard side. Side of the ship, and it was gone. So anyway, that was pretty interesting. Not much happened about it because there was only him and I that really saw it. We didn't talk much about it, And I didn't really get on with this guy anyway. And so then a few days, I don't know whether it was that day or a few days later anyway, a few nights later, I had a dream where I remembered. It was a dream that made me remember about an event that happened when I was about 6 or 7. in 1967. This happened, and it would have been just late spring, in about November. And what was happening is
I'm going to take you to the next part of this because, again, this triggered the memory of an amazing sighting that actually affected most of the town. Take you to the next one. So let me do that. Here we go.
yeah, I don't know whether it was that day or a few days later anyway, a few nights later. I had a dream where I remembered, it was a dream that made me remember about an event that happened when I was about 6 or 7, in 1967. This happened, it would have been just late spring, in about November. And what was happening is we lived right next to high school. There was big football fields right out the back of our yard. And there was no television there. And so everybody played out on the football field. And there was a huge community of us because we were right around all of the houses built right around high school. And so then so my father's teaching us kids how to hit golf balls. And we're aiming at all these Pacific Islanders out in the paddock. It's quite fun to really get some good shots in, you know. Anyway, as that was happening, the sun was coming down over the high school. It was coming on sunset. And so it's a really golden race. It's just beautiful. And one of these rare occasions, an old man's playing with us. That was even more fun for me. So anyway, that's all happening. And we were just taking turns having a swat at these clubs, had these balls and that. And then from the south, there was a light. You could see it because of the sun rays that were coming this way. You could feel and sense a change of colour. And the atmosphere started going from this golden hue to this golden hue and reddish. Red, not red, but you know, pinky, orange, red, all these different colours, which got me looking down to the south. And at the time, what I saw was something about appeared that big. Now I'm 7, so it wasn't very big. It looked about today about size 50 piece. But even as it was approaching, it was giving off this really luminant orange and red light. As it got closer, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it was about the size of a 747, and it was hovering right on top of, right as like everybody's there watching this thing, and it just came in and it's almost silent. Didn't actually have a sound, but it felt it. It felt it. You know, it's kind of like feeling the speakers. All constant. And so, so then, but as it was coming in, I said to Dad, "What's that, Dad?" And he said, "I don't know, son. Maybe it's something the Air Force has got." And then like that. But anyway,
What town is this, by the way?
Tokoroa, a place called Tokoroa in central North Island in the south. So as it turned out, there was a lot of UFO phenomena, particularly in the 60s, around that area, right around the whole Waikato area. And different newspapers actually carried those different articles, which I remember my parents talking about, you know, and I can't really remember whether or not they were talking about it before or after, because I know that this was something they were reading a lot about in the paper, so it could have been. So I remembered anyway the incident where this thing turned up, and that's why I came and I came to see you, Mary, about doing this induction. So just go and have a look, see what else happened, or is that a dream?
And in terms of that experience, do you have any sense of how many people actually saw this particular object?
Oh, I would easily estimate 200 people would have seen it,
Right.
because of the amount of kids that were playing there. So interestingly, in the experience, as this thing turns up, because it's big, it's like really big, and it's about hovering at about 200 meters. Yeah, 200 feet, I think. Really lovely, and quite incredibly. And I do remember seeing, well, everybody was looking at this thing. Couldn't miss it. And what, then the old man goes, time for dinner, kids. Time to go inside. And so we all immediately all went inside. But as I was about to walk inside, I really didn't want to. I want to have this thing. But as I looked inside, I could see literally everyone all turned at the same time. They didn't run back to the house like in sheer panic. They turned around. There were parents that had come out, you know, and they'd gathered their kids, but then they just walked away. So that's what I'd seen at the time.
So what was unusual in that sense was that it wasn't like anybody was making a fuss about what they were seeing. Nobody, they all just sort of.
Oh, so going back.
So let's take that now to the next level, because what was really important here, as Greg was saying, is up to maybe 200 people had seen this huge craft as big as a football field. And at the same time, they all start to walk away, almost like they're in some kind of altered state, including his own father, without any comment on what they'd seen. So this is really now where we get to the next part. So this awoken with Greg, this amazing memory. And so he wanted to find out whether or not it was as he remembered. And he decided to go and speak to the neighbors. And what's really interesting was initially they didn't remember until he asked about it. And then the man remembered. So here you go.
Oh, so going back, so I had these dreams, right? And they got clearer and clearer. I got to get to see more and more information. Oh, this is bizarre. I had to see my dream all the time. So I was on a trip anyway, going around the Asian, the neighbour sides with Australia and Singapore, places like that. And that was about 4 months. So after that, I got a chance to go back, and I had shore leave afterward. So I went and saw my neighbours, and because they were equally fascinated to hear the story about this young wolf in the country going to join the neighbours. It was a big thing for us. And so I was talking to them, and I wanted to just ask them straight out, but I just decided I'd tell them about what I'd seen on the ship. And there was David Esseley on. Anyway, they listened to the story and they went, "Oh, that's pretty interesting, isn't it?" Which made me kind of remember something that might have happened here. I don't know whether it was a dream or whether or not it really happened. And you guys remember because you were there. We were all there. And what happened? I described what I'd seen in the dream. And for a moment there, they sort of chuckled at me like you're a fruit loop. And then you could see the old man, and he suddenly clicked and he goes, "Hang on a minute, I do remember that." I said, "Do you remember reading articles in the paper about Russian satellites falling out of the sky and finding the bits and pieces just in our neighbourhood where it took out a whole bunch of trees and all that sort of thing?" I said, yeah, the army turned up. Then the old girl was looking at him and said, "I remember that event as well. How come we don't remember it?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." That was about where I got to the end. You know, I just sort of like, couldn't take much further than that.
So what was interesting here is really finding out more understanding, because there was no more apart from the dreams, and he wanted to know a lot more about what was going on. So we had a big craft the size of a football field, shadowed the whole area. So big, it was bigger than 10, it looked so big in this experience, bigger than 10 levels, he said, humming and vibrating. Hundreds of people were looking at it. He was watching everyone as they're holding their kids' hands, going to their houses. So he goes outside again. So you're going to hear a little bit more of that.
Or anything else that occurred either with you or your family.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. You can perceive yourself in that particular experience. Are you there?
I'm there. Yeah.
Okay. Can you describe what you see?
In the distance, I'm pointing out today that there's something in the air changing the colour light spectrum. I didn't use those words, but I was pointing out the colour light.
What happens next?
See, now it's right there, right in front of us. It's actually shadowed the whole area. So sort of made it like dark. It's actually kind of orangey red, but dark underneath it. Mostly it's like not the sun's getting on. Making the whole field kind of dark, but orange and red.
And where are you standing?
I'm standing right in the backyard. It's right next to the house. You can sort of feel the heat of the sun and this sort of energy all around it. This thing's hovering about 200 something feet in the air.
How big is it?
It looks really, really big. Like it's the length of the football field. It looks bigger than that actually, and really deep, like as a thick, deep, but it's very deep, multi-story.
When you say multi-story, can you give me a sense of the height of the multi-story part of the craft?
Oh, yeah, it's big. It's like looking at one of those new jets, like 380s or whatever, the real big ones. And it looks like it has 3 levels, but it looks bigger than 3 levels. Looks like it could be 10 levels, but I can see the top part, which is 3 levels, but it has a real deep base on it. It's really big, and it's humming, vibrates, it hums. You can feel it in your body.
So you feel a hum, or do you hear a hum?
Not hearing much. Everybody's just staring at it. There's hundreds of people out on the football field just looking up at it. See other people walking up to their kids. They can lift you, as it's lifting us now.
So now Greg finds he goes onto the craft, and this is some of the experience on the craft.
It's lifting us now.
So he is lifting yourself, anybody else?
Yeah, my whole family.
Your whole family?
No, just who's there.
Okay.
But it's not just happening to us, it's happening to a lot of these people on the football field too. These sleeves are like blue, cobalt blue electric energy. Also has a sound to it.
Sound?
Yeah, it sounds like a liquid slopping around. Anyway, I'm on the ship now.
Whereabouts, what is the environment that you're in on the ship? What does it look like?
Oh, it's a bridge. It's a section of the control area. There's a lot of, oh, this is really interesting.
What do you use, what can you see?
You see, this grasshopper man.
Grasshopper man, can you tell me what you mean by that? Describe.
It's like a man, but he's about 8 or 9 feet tall, and he has a real grasshopper looking head. But he's a man with kind of reptilian hands. It's really interesting. He's talking to me.
Okay, so how's he talking to you?
Oh, it's half of it's body language, and the rest is telepathy.
Okay, so what is this being saying to you?
He's showing me he's showing me a bit of future actually. He's showing it to me on the screen. He's telling me about learning this breathing technique. See now, that was my grand master was teaching me this stuff. Breathing technique to talk to him.
A breathing technique to talk to
him. Yeah, master also said it's a breathing technique to talk to him. Same way. It's very interesting. So
you say he was showing you something to do with your future. What was he showing you?
Well, you showed me this. You showed me a couple of things. I can't remember. You showed me this pyramid. Okay. So I've seen this really cool pyramid. And I think that's why I will grab it. You know, it's like 5 stories. It's a really big thing. The essence of this pyramid is more the idea of getting people comfortable. But what I'm seeing here are crystal plates. What they are is faceted semi-precious stones that are in a like a lamina, like sheets. They're like a mandala that have different frequencies. I'm looking at this and being told about the human light body, and I can see this is going real fast. I've been shown human light bodies, which then I'm told you'll be able to see this and you'll understand what it means. But essentially the focus is on doing these, they look like light beads.
Light beams?
Light beads.
Light beds?
Yeah, you get an ill person and they lay inside the bed and you slide on the appropriate slides. The frequency coming through the beds themselves creates some energetic change in that energy field of the aura of the person. From above, it heals them, heals the physical condition. That's the primary purpose and need for this eventual pyramid. It's very interesting.
So he's showing you this pyramid for what purpose?
It's an awareness thing. It's an awareness thing. And it's about the same thing about what's really happening now is that's happening as my 6, 7-year-old body. Intellectually, I am fully conscious of what this man's saying to me, even though I'm very young. You know, I have a good grasp of what's going on. I have no concern about this individual like a grasp.
Do you know this being? Have you seen this being before? When did
I'm
you?
very familiar with it.
Okay, so what were the ages when you saw this being before?
I'm not really sure. I think I might have been much younger. Each time on an intellectual level, I had no difficulty grasping what he was saying to me. Generally, didn't normally turn out looking like grass.
What did he look like at other times?
They can shift to this. They can make themselves look different. But I think in the relaxed form, this is what they look like.
There's some really important points there that are made, apart from the fact that Greg was shown, even at that age, some very complex healing awareness and consciousness. And I deliberately asked him about whether or not this being was familiar to him, because I find time and time again that there is usually a being in that experience that they're familiar with and that they've been visited more than once. So onboard craft.
So I'm still there on this craft. I'm now looking around it. This thing's huge. There's a lot of people on board, human people. They
You said a lot of people.
well, they don't all look like grasshoppers. They're not bulbous head individuals. They're tall. And there's quite a few varieties. There's some there they can levitate. So instead of walking, they levitate.
What do they look like?
They glow.
They glow.
Okay. Glow. They're like, it's like me looking at a spiritual entity or something. They're quite visible. You can touch them. They're touching mine right now.
Okay. What does it feel like?
Gelatinous. It's cool. And you touch it and it glows, like shines. Very nice energy after it. They kind of look like us. This place isn't that well lit. So it's more like a control. Sounds like an old show. Yeah.
So what happens next when you have this information given to you?
So then I'm find myself moving forward in time. 28, sitting in a park and all. This is the first time I see Jared. Jared's another entity that's come like a Zeta.
And this is when you're 28? Okay. So you needed to go forward to see this being?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell me what's the next thing that happens when you see this being?
Jared's first communication with me is just appearing. Every time I blinked, I could see him. In between the blink time. So if I shut my eyes on it, I could see Jared. He floated in my awareness. He could turn on my arm and spin him and do things like that. He could communicate with me. And so I started asking him questions which were relevant to why are you there? And are you there by invitation? Eventually, I became aware that this is a deliberate time that I'm supposed to be reminded about something which I completely forgotten about. And so then say to him, so this has happened over 3 days. The first time it happened, I just thought it was tripping. Just went back to work. And so the next day I was doing some meditation, same spot, something happened. On the third day it happened again. And then by this time I was sort of looking at his hands, all kinds of stuff, getting to do interesting things. I think it's just having fun in my mind. And trying to comprehend the 3D image I'm seeing of somebody that I had no real intention of creating, so I had to realize it was something. So I said to him, I asked him what his name was, and it eventually came to me that it was Jacob. Then it came to me because I saw road signs that put it all together for me. It's kind of weird how he did that. Then so I said to him, okay, if you're not a fit in then I want you to beam me up, take me on your ship, show me whatever it is that I'm supposed to see, and give me the brief that I'm supposed to get. And I want to be conscious of it. I want to be able to remember. Cool. So I agreed with him, which I think was great. And sometime within 5 days of that statement, once again I was physical or in a non-physical state. I don't know, sure seemed physical. But I found myself on like a treatment table.
So now what happens with the hypnosis is that Greg recalls consciously his experience on board craft. And this is the experience on board craft that he remembers consciously.
Statement. Once again, I was physical or in a non-physical state. I don't know, sure seemed physical. But I found myself on like a treatment table, except it wasn't blind, talent, quite well. So I find myself sitting up, just sitting up on the side of the table. And there were these little zetas there that there's 4 of them. That's what it helped me get out. Oh, interesting. I don't know what's happening. Anyway, it's a very small room, but and I'm sort of pretty spun out about seeing these because they didn't know about Jacob. And but I could see that they meant my heart.
You felt that?
And it started to occur to me, hey, these follow through. So then the wall separates don't have doors, it just opens up right there. Yeah. Doesn't have that actually. And these two beings come. No, three beings come.
What do they look like?
They're tall. Two of them are a little bit taller than me, and they're small. They're wearing white. They have a real air about them. And there's a female there. She's got green eyes, light golden, but very green eyes. I think dark eyes. These people got coloured eyes. It's really scary. Yeah. And they walked in, I thought she had eaten something.
So they look scary.
Oh, yeah. I'm still trying to comprehend the J-Wag. Really, these ones are taller than what in my imagination they were. And I hear inside me, she's talking to me, it's just telling me it's okay. You actually wanted to be here. And there's two male figures behind her. And so she puts her hand out to help me get off the table. She's doing that, but I smell it. I don't know. I just want to see it as well.
And what did it smell like?
Old books. Actually, old place smell. And here, like old books. But their hands were cool, like your grandmother's hands. Quite old. And anyway, so then I really remembered, yes, I wanted to be. So I was telling myself to calm down. And then she said, you wanted to see how this craft works. Kind of helping me along, actually. She seems to be in. I said, yeah, I do. I want to know how this craft works. I want to know how this thing flies. So we walk out of that room. This craft isn't unique. Come out of the room into a hallway, go into what looks like an internal entrance to a platform. And there you've got three people that they don't look like these people.
How are they different?
They're kind of ape-like. They have a band that's going across here, simple band. And there's something here, we're communicating anyway. They've got their hand on a plate, which is shaped like their hand. The neurosensors underneath it is microscopic neurosensors, almost like the peaks you see on the side of nature. And all three are controlling this vehicle. This is like a pilot craft. This is like one of those, like the 50-meter one I told you about coming out of the ocean. We're coming up to another ship.
Another ship?
Is there one of these cylindrical vehicles?
So it's cylindrical. How big is it?
The interesting thing here is that
was actually on that craft. After having a look at from the bonnet and system drive, I asked them where the engine was. This thing doesn't actually have an engine on the side. So they take me into this room. These walls are really fascinating. Every time you want to go through it, they just go and open up and then close up again. We're in this room. The men are talking to me. They're explaining to me about Earth polarity, using it as an example, magnetic polarities, and how these things bounce along magnetic lines, and that's why they skip like skipping stones. On the craft, there are several different varieties. One is the one that I'm looking at is a two-pole axis. And what happens is the frequency, the electromagnetic field frequency that spins between these poles creates a higher vibrational frequency. So therefore, in a molecular condition, everything breaks down to subatomic or quantum particles. So therefore, movement through time and space moves infinitely with ease. You know? So that's why things dematerialize and rematerialize. When people say it just appeared and then it disappeared, and it appears and disappears. And when you're watching it in the sky, you see it light and then it dims down and lights up again. That's what's happening, is the vibrational frequency that's matching the Earth frequency. So then this thing becomes visual, visible. So anyway, I start to walk toward it, and they grab me by the hand and explain to me this is like a miniature black hole, therefore they can move through time and space effortlessly using this dual polarity system. But they said with the larger craft, they have much big towers. Instead of being dual like that, they're like that. So like two spark plugs together. Very interesting design. So yeah, that's how. Now the interesting thing about the whole craft too is because of these interaction of these three parts, and the very nature of the fabric of these crafts, there are varieties of craft, and some of them are actually growing like a cultured organism. And by that, what I mean is that instead of having a wiring, you actually have, you know, just like we have meridians and nerves and arteries and veins and muscles. So these craft, they're literally growing. So when you put these driving consoles on, what actually happens is you become part of the vehicle. So the three beams on there, they are actually changing as the vehicle moves forward in time and space. Actually, there's a field ahead of it, of course, and that's that has like a total sense of what's actually ahead of it, not different from looking at a radar screen as well. But you get it through these triangular things that they're weird, and the controls are just flight controls. So yeah, very interesting vehicle.
So it's a kind of living kind of vehicle.
Yeah, it's a living organism, even though it's a metallic structure. The actual essence of its actual optic fibers that are ingrained into the metallic material are actually living. They're like living things. So you can actually plug into it and the whole thing comes alive. It's quite amazing.
And
what's interesting here is that I did this regression now, probably a good 10 years ago. And it's only in recent times, more and more, we're hearing about the living craft, which, you know, corroborates quite a great deal of what Greg was talking about. It wasn't very, it wasn't certainly something we knew a great deal about when I did this regression those years ago. So here we go again, and I hope you found it as interesting as I did at the time, because of the way it gave such a detailed information of the science.
About being shown portals or ways through into other parts of the galaxy or other universes. You actually show some kind of gate. Could you describe what that's like?
Mostly it's an energetic gateway. People think about gateways as solid things, which is what they are. But when you're using something that's 32 kilometers long, for through one of those ones, so what actually happens is it's an energetic from these large cylindrical vehicles. They create an energy field right around them. It's of such a high frequency that they can target positions in time and space and literally grab the alternate side of space. So you're going from one constellation to the other. Actually,
And the frequency, it changes its frequency to the destination.
Yeah. So you hook on space from here, and 2 points of time and space cannot exist, right? So you cannot have 7.6 here, and then this thing alters to 13.62. Then you instantly are drawing that galaxy literally to you, but without dragging this one to it. So then the volition of this, by the law of physics, automatically pulls it to that destination. And time is irrelevant, because these things are moving all the time. So how long it takes them to get there is probably not very long. You can be done in days. What we class as days would be in another galaxy. So very fast.
So that will give you a bit of an idea of some of the material that comes through when I do a regression. And we certainly didn't expect, and I didn't expect to get that kind of information. But what was fascinating about Greg's story is he was shown the future as a 7-year-old and told that he would be coming to Australia. And he did end up moving to Australia and having a family and coming to the location where I live. And that was how I met him. And he was working in a healing way with a great deal of awareness, I'll have to say, in how he did his healing. And I think that was a tribute to him, that he said, Mary, they changed my intelligence to a much higher frequency so I could understand what was going on. As you can see, he was explaining concepts that maybe a physicist understands better than I do. But anyway, what I'd like to end with, and then I can talk a little bit more about the many different varieties of information and what people find out and understand from their experiences. This was one. Many of you may be aware of Peter Slattery. He's taken incredible footage over the years. He's done his latest documentary, Multidimensional, where I talk about a little bit of my understanding of Peter's story and what have you. And Peter's been here to Agnes as well. The very first regression he ever had, I did over the computer, over the internet, and he filmed it. And what you're seeing is the filming of that particular regression. Now, there's something that happened during that surprised him more than it surprised me, because sometimes this happens. And I think it's taking it to another level in the sense of what happened. And that was a being came in during that hypnosis that answered questions about Pete. And it was a revelation to him afterwards, because it was giving him information about what he needed to take notice of. It happens occasionally in regressions that I do, that either the higher self or superconscious will come in and give information, or one of the beings we call guides or helpers, or, you know, sometimes as I say, spirit guides or non-human intelligences come in that are connected to the individual on the non-physical realm. And that takes me to a little bit more of how we work on the level of consciousness. But to start with, just to give you an idea of how that manifested, for anyone who does hypnosis, I'm sure they've experienced this occasionally if they work at that deeper level. So let's start this off.
Is there anything that Peter needs to know from you at this moment in time that would be helpful on his journey?
Stop being stubborn.
Is there anything he can do about that part of him that makes it difficult, as you call stubborn? Is there anything he can do to move or balance that energy so that things can flow more freely for him energetically?
He needs to lose doubt.
And how can he do that in the most efficient way?
Will help.
Okay. And you'll help in what way will you help this process?
Show more. Show more.
So you will make things more tangible and real for him so that he can embrace his expanded reality.
Yes.
Have any of these other intelligences got anything they wish to convey to Peter on his journey at this particular time?
More confident. Hey, needs to be more confident. Take stands. Confident. No, he'll be looked after.
Is there anything more that he needs to know and be aware of at this moment in time?
He knows. He knows.
Okay.
Stop being stubborn.
The reason that I've shown that is to show that often it can take the hypnotherapist by surprise when this happens, because it's obvious then there's been a shift and there's been an intelligence that's connected to the individual that wants to speak directly through. And this was the first time, as I say, that Peter had a regression, let alone have this happen. And he was quite floored by it at the time. I know now this is a lot more normal for him, and he's written several books since, and he communicates very comfortably and easily now with these intelligences. But what it's saying is there's something on a consciousness level that's going on, and that's why, you know, it can be very useful, because you can really touch that other level of awareness within the individual to get understanding about their experiences. And that's why I found it absolutely invaluable. And I will explain how you can know the difference between your subconscious information and what some would say is your imagination or your creativity. And I'll explain that in a minute after we've done, I've shown you the rest of this. But this is just to give you a very small précis of the types of things that can come through. That was Greg's story, which was included in My Mum Talks to Aliens. And in this documentary that I did in 2010, they show Greg doing a polygraph. And what frustrated me and was very unfair for Greg, they questioned him on his hypnosis information. And because it was in hypnosis, it is less conscious. And so it didn't come out as a positive. And I discussed this with the gentleman doing the polygraph, and we both understood that you are less certain about material that comes up through an altered state. And that was the reason why it came out that way. But unfortunately, because of the documentary and the, who put it together, that really important fact was missed. So it looked like, to those that didn't know, that Greg actually could have been making it up. And it was only because he was questioned on his regression information with Peter Curry that was in this, where I did a regression with Peter Curry. The difference was that it was his conscious memory that was questioned, and it came out that he was completely correct. So that's really important, because it is hard for those who are having regression hypnosis with information that comes that way, because it's in trance, because it's in an altered state. It's much harder for someone to take it on board and give it validity, except for, as I know many people who've had hypnosis and look into it, they have many corroborations over the time with others having similar stories, etc., that give them credibility. And like Greg was saying about the craft, the conscious craft, or the living craft, much has come out about that from many other experiences. So hypnosis allows for the hidden subconscious information to be revealed to the conscious mind. The fear of the unknown becomes the known, and the facing of the fear brings new understanding, personal empowerment, integration, and healing. And I will talk about that more in depth with the questions, because I'm sure you've got plenty of them. I have shown many hypnotherapists how to work on another level with this particular technique that I use. And this level is being very present with the individual when they're going into this frequency. And the connection with the individual appears to suggest that the facilitator can access information the individual is also exploring. And I'll talk about that if anyone would like to know how this happens. This transfer of connection with the hypnotherapist is multidimensional information in a superconscious state. In other words, it's not an isolated thing when you're taking somebody into hypnosis. Often there is a connection made, which makes it far more of a multi-dimensional, multi-consciousness experience, both for the therapist, hypnotherapist, and the individual being hypnotized. So, thoughts and its value. This was someone who'd had hypnosis. I encourage anyone who's had ET experiences to consider a regression if it's conducted in safety, trust, and with love. While the journey may take you to some dark places, the light is with you every step of the way, and you will come away with a better understanding of what has occurred, why it's happened, and what your future also holds. So there we go.